conservation districts and as the administrator of our State Natural Resource Conservation Council. I'm not necessarily a practitioner, so I'm here mostly just to keep tabs on what things are going on because we do fund projects and we do support a lot of people who do projects. So yeah, thanks.
I'm Hillary Solomon with the Poultney-Meadowy Conservation District. And I'm really excited to be here because I missed the last meeting, so really happy. Stacy.
Stacy, you're muted.
I can't hear you, Stacy.
Although I don't see a muted icon on your image, so.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, you all know me. Hi, I'm Stacy. Happy Friday. Data.
Dana Hazen, Red Start Forestry, do SWA throughout Vermont and New Hampshire. Anyone left? Kelsey, maybe?
Hey guys, my name's Kelsey. I'm the Conservation Communications Fellow here at TNC, and I'm just helping in the background today. It's nice to see you all. Happy Friday. I think that's back to you, Shane.
All right, and I think that's everybody except for me, Shane Jake with Nature Conservancy, Watershed Restoration Program Manager. And I do want to let everybody know I just hit the record button. If hopefully everyone's okay with that. If not, I can unclick that button. But assuming I don't see anybody, I don't see any hands, so I'll keep the tape rolling. So I just want to quickly review what we did last meeting for those who maybe don't remember, because I know I didn't remember until I looked at the notes and Hillary was not here. So yeah, what we did last meeting, Stacy and Keith gave us an update on the progress of the DEC Strategic Wood Addition working group that's ongoing. We discussed the merger of what had previously been our two groups, one focused on strategic wood addition and one kind of focused on other forms of river and floodplain restoration. And we decided that we would merge those two groups. So here we are now as one big happy river floodplain restoration family. Catherine King from DEC gave a really informative presentation on the WHISPER program and how that program can be used to fund restoration projects. And then we heard from me on the U.S. Forest Service landscape scale restoration proposal, or the proposal that we made to the landscape scale restoration funding program for big strategic wood addition push. And an update on that really quickly is that out of approximately 31 or 32 proposals, ours was ranked 17. And I believe that based on what I've heard back from the Forest Service folks, it's more likely that we're not going to get the funding than it is. They say it's really close, but more likely that we will not receive that funding. So we're going to have to regroup on that front and figure out how we move forward in lack of that funding. I have been talking to folks from the Long Island Sound Futures Fund, and they're somewhat interested in the project. I'm sure many of you know that they're really working the ground pretty hard trying to find projects to fund through the Long Island Sound Futures Fund, and they contacted us about our project. So maybe that's where we'll take it from here. So that's the wrap on our last meeting. And with that, Patrick, if you're ready, I think you should be able to share your screen. We can jump into your presentation on the Valley Brook project.
Sure. Joe, you got something to say?
Yeah, Shane, just real quick, maybe you know this, but with the Long Island Futures thing, I think that's the one that they're really looking for wood turtle related projects. And this strategic wood addition definitely plays into that. So just a thought to kind of play that up if you end up going that route to bring wood turtles into it.
Great. Thank you, Jed. That's helpful.
Hey, Patrick, this is Hillary. Are you going to talk a little bit through your presentation about how the different parts were funded or how it was funded?
I do have some funding stuff, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yep. Great. Well, let me get set up. I can't share, Shane. Uh-oh.
Can't share. Okay, let me go back here.
Maybe I can request.
Let's go to people. Where are you? There you are. Make you a presenter.
There we go. Everybody see what I see? Okay.
We do.
All right, thank you. So I have had the privilege of working on the Valley Brook Stream Bank Management Area. This is a property that was recently acquired by Fish and Wildlife Department from a family farm that has been retired. And years ago, I think 6 or 7 years ago, the Orleans County Conservation District approached the landowner, the farmer, and tried to come up with a few different, best management practices to manage, runoff from the barnyard and cows in the stream corridor, stream crossings, buffers. There were a couple different iterations of plans, including CREP, but ultimately with like the volatile dairy market, the farm just wasn't really viable anymore. It's a pretty hard piece of ground to farm. It's very wet. This is a confluence of several small tributaries that merge with Valley Brook that you see running through this middle of this photo. And so Fish and Wildlife stepped up, and over the course of 2 years, they purchased the property using funds from Vermont Housing Conservation Board, some funds from the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission, and some funds from the Nature Conservancy, who co-holds the easement on the property. And so once that sale closed in August of 22, Pete Emerson approached me about designing and implementing, fish passage and floodplain restoration actions for this property. It's about 160 acres. And so we spent better part of winter and spring 2022 and 3 going through some iterative designs, had a bunch of meetings with some of the DEC regulatory staff and biologists, and implemented this project starting in July of 2023 and wrapped it up in September. And so we've had now a fall, winter, and spring, half of the spring, to see everything shake out. And we're pretty pleased, and I'm excited to show you all what that looks like. So you're going to see this type of photo a lot. So just know that this old barnyard by this little greenhouse was a big effort. And then the stream coming through, going from left to right along the stream or along the screen. And there's a tributary coming in right here that was ditched. Another tributary coming in here that was ditched. A third tributary coming in here that was ditched. There's a fourth tributary that comes right by that greenhouse, goes underneath the barn, and daylight's right there, and a couple other cross drains. So there's a lot of water entering this site. And just so you know where we are, we're in Morgan, Vermont. This is just upstream of Lake Seymour, which is one of the cleanest lakes in the state, and we like to keep it that way. So this is very much a sediment and phosphorus reduction project, but it's also a fish and wildlife habitat improvement project and AOP project. So, little preconditions. It was pretty hammered. There were a lot of cows out here for a long time. There was, just really wet soils that didn't hold up well to trampling. There was not a lick of woody vegetation along the stream, and quite a bit of sediment coming off the banks, coming through, out of the channel bed and passing through the system. Also, there was a handful of events that I saw where manure was overflowing from the pit, and so just not a great place for water quality. And so our goals were to stabilize the banks with as minimal disruption or disturbance as possible. Reduce that sediment and that phosphorus loading, improve connection to floodplains, increase flood frequency, increase passability, try to get some woody stuff growing. And then while we're at it, do some in-stream habitat improvement as well. So, another picture just showing you the state of affairs. We're pretty dramatic vertical banks in a lot of places. You can see some bars forming and shifting around pretty frequently with each rain event. And so we like this brook. This brook is really important. It's one of the biggest tributaries to Lake Seymour. It's a pretty high quality brook and rainbow and brown trout fishery. It's also a potential landlocked Atlantic salmon fishery with stocking of salmon in Lake Seymour, with the goal of them utilizing this headwater stream for spawning. This being a stream bank management area with a lot of upland habitat, 140 acres plus of upland habitat. We're interested in the birds and the bees, and a lot of yellow spotted salamanders on this project or on this property. We're interested in floodwater storage because there's been a lot of flood damage downstream of this property as a result of like bad culverts. And it's all about public access: fishing, hunting, trapping, wildlife viewing. There's a vast trail that goes right through the property that we had to reroute. So that's kind of our goals, for trying to improve those conditions and those functions. And so to start, we did a really, kind of intensive topo bathymetric survey of the stream and merged that with some of our available LiDAR and ran a hydraulic model at a couple different intervals from like half, Q.5 all the way to 200-year flood, and tried to identify like where is that floodplain missing. And so we found that the barnyard, when they developed the barnyard, essentially bulldozed all the hillside flat to put the barn and pushed all that fill into the river corridor. So there's this big chunk of floodplain that was lost during that process. Another chunk over here that had been lost during more grading. You can see the contours kind of show you this nice little pad that someone had developed. And then another disconnection lower down where a main road passes over the brook. And when we went out there in July to start our work, we woke up to like a 5-inch rainstorm, and we had what amounts to approximately a 550 CFS flood the day before we we're going to start. And we got Judd out here. He's a hero. He drove up really fast to get up here and fly his drone for us. And so we were able to delineate the flood extents because the grass had just been mowed down flat by the floodwaters. And so it was really cool, kind of baseline condition for us to document before any restoration had happened, and it corroborated our modeling quite well. So that was pretty exciting to see. But then it was like, okay, we got to get this work done, and everything's super saturated. So we were concerned about that. So we kind of had a ramping up start. We started with a lot of woody additions, and then later on the barn came down, and you'll see a little bit of that in the next few slides. But again, there's a lot of water, but we focused on taking down this barn in the top left corner, reclaiming those floodplain areas. And then you can see just how many waterways come into this stream from the hillsides around it. And so we try to address every tributary, every draw, every swale, whatever you want to call, that had been altered or that could be enhanced through, either process-based restoration or some quick and light excavation work. You can see there's a couple roads. That dash line is the vast trail culverts in these little red X's. 9 culverts were removed from this property, both big and small, all to improve passage, but also to reduce erosion because none of them were installed all that well. So we started in July. The barn came down. The barn removal was funded through the Agency of Agriculture, and VHCB is a farm retirement project. We recycled all of those trusses from the roof of the barns. Half of them went up the road to the Pat Node farm, and half of them went home with the contractor who took the barn down. And then we essentially reclaimed the barnyard. We obliterated about a quarter mile of farm and forest road, and we removed a bunch of culverts, and we tried to do a lot of treatment of the floodplains to, slow water down, infiltrate it, drop sediment. and I'm going to show you each one of these little components one by one. So when we had reclaimed the barnyard, we had to cover it with clean fill because it was essentially just like a gravel and concrete pad. And so a bunch, about 3,000 cubic yards of that fill that we took out of the floodplain up the hill, and we capped the barnyard with it, graded it, seeded it, added a few drainage swales so that it wouldn't erode, and put up some silt fence between it and the floodplain, which you can see here. This is the restored floodplain. So we brought in probably 100 cubic yards of woody debris that had been stashed in a corner of the property during maple sugar thinning operations, sugar bush thinning operations a couple years ago. And it was perfect mulch. It had like started to break down. There was a lot of like just self-mulching, rotting pieces of wood. That was great for just soil organic matter. But there was also a lot of big chunks and stumps, boles, stems, branches that were actually useful, clumpy, chunky pieces of wood that we incorporated into the soil of the floodplain. So this floodplain is very much what I like to say resembles the Western Front. Looks like a bomb went off. There's a lot of pits, a lot of mounds, a lot of wood sticking out of the ground, a lot of wood half buried in the ground. Contractor had fun installing vertical pieces. We like to call them the eagle perches. But what they serve a purpose, because if you have these posts sticking up out of the ground, they'll actually help to stop entrained wood, catch it, retain it, rack it up, build it up. So it's kind of a wood retention practice that we're excited to see the contractors be willing to do. So we claimed, almost an acre of restored floodplain as a result of this work. And then we hydro-seeded it with Northwood's seed collection crew with like 90 million seeds, which is an absurd amount, but a lot of the seed had been collected over the last couple of years. Its viability wasn't, super confident. And so we over applied, and we have not seen anything come up yet because of dormant season. But there's already a bunch of our wetland species popping up. And I think what would happen is we hit that old seed bank down below where the former floodplain was, because we start seeing, wetland species come up before we had even applied seed. So that happened really quick. Like I said, we removed 9 culverts. Most of them were under 2 feet. This one in the top left panel was a 3 or 4 foot pipe that we pulled out of the main stem of the stream. This is actually a ski lift tower that came off of a local old ski hill that had been retired years ago. So that was pretty fun to find. So this is a fish barrier. It was also a major flood pinch point. So this pipe was, a quarter or less of the bank full width. So essentially it acted as a major reducer of the stream channel. And so it'd back up. And what we would find is it would flank this road prism and gouge out the floodplain and, transport a ton of sediment, erode the bank even further each flood. And so we really wanted to pull that out of there and reconnect the stream, longitudinally. And so we did just that. We pulled it out. We rebuilt the banks with some soil lifts, created a constructed riffle. But there was also this tributary. So there's the culvert, and that's before and after. And there was also this tributary that had been ditched along the road. So this trib used to go kind of across the road and fan out on the right side of this panel. And over the years, the farmer got annoyed of it coming down the road. So he ditched to the left of the road and let the stream go through this ditch. And it was pretty bad. It was 3 feet in size. It was blowing its banks out left and right. This is like really black dirt. This is really good dirt, but it's terrible for water once it starts eroding a bank. It just turns into like the Georgia swamp, black water. So we really wanted to disconnect that ditch. And so we did. We obliterated the road, we filled the ditch, and we sent the brook across the former road into its historic alignment, which is very much a fan, which is perfect for dissipating floods, spreading water out. So here we reconnected about 500 feet of the tributary and got about 3/4 of an acre of floodplain in the form of an alluvial fan. And you can see there is a ton of wood on this fan. This is pretty far away, but all those little horizontal pieces, these are all beaver dams, and these are all floodplain structures that we built and staked or post drove in place to try to slow that water down. So this is a before and after that constructed riffle. This stream through this property has like 2 pools and half of a riffle. There's really poor habitat, but there's a lot of fish in the pools that kind of like concentrate or get stuck in an outlet scour pool, can't get up through the culvert. So there are a lot of fish passing through this system, but there's not a lot of habitat. So the stones for the riffle were oversized because we really didn't want it to, erode or wash out. But it's a great grade control because that culvert had created such a vertical shift in such a short longitudinal span that we needed a grade control. So the riffle is really like multifaceted, 3 goals or whatever. We got better fish passage, we have a grade control, and we have improved habitat in terms of like aerating, and maybe we get some hyporheic exchange. So just really trying to maximize the utility of these restoration actions. You can see looking up, this is the former road that we obliterated, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a second. But here's some close-ups of that fan. By obliterating the road, restoring the floodplain, and realigning that tributary, we were able to create a bunch of pocket wetlands on this property. This one, right here at the top of this middle panel, I wish I had like a little pointer. Is there a pointer somewhere? Whatever. So up here, you can see that's the actual riffle that we construct. You can just see that reconstructed bank. So we've got these kind of permanent off-channel wetlands that are now forming, which previously would have just drained, wouldn't even pond water. So now we're seeing continuous water ponding on this floodplain. This is the top of a 1,200-foot ditch that we filled. And you can see just how much higher that water table is. Previously this was pretty dry, you could hay it. Now nobody's getting in there with a tractor to hay. It is very much a big sponge. So with all the ditch work, this ditch filling, ditch plugging, ditch disconnection, and the road obliteration, we were able to claim over 3.5 acres of wetland enhancement. We put at least 25 little wood structures you can see down here in the right panel all throughout that alluvial fan. So that reconnected tributary is coming in from the top right corner of this panel. And then this is a pretty beefy stream bank that we rebuilt, all because we didn't want that thing jumping down the old road and washing out. So we really over-engineered this diversion, this reconnection tie-in point, and then we built like a Q.5 channel so that every time it rained, it was going to spill out of that channel and into this alluvial fan area. And you'll see this is kind of an insurance policy. You've got this obliterated road coming in, and then every so often we would put a swale, a cross drain, a turnout, whatever you want to call it, just so that if something started to gully, it couldn't get very far before it hit, a second line of defense. Sediment would stop, drop out, water would slow down, spill back out off the road into the wetland. So that's the lower part of the road obliteration. This is the upper part. This is as it goes into the woods. You can see it was all full of ruts. Every time it rained, the hay fields would drain down into these ruts, wash down the road, go right to the brook. This was a pretty light touch, top right panel, really just scarification. There was enough seed and veg already growing there that we didn't feel the need to heavily plant it. It already sprouted right up. But the lower corners, you can see this is where the stream would jump out of that channelized section of the trib and then run down the road. And we'd see gravel, sand and gravel bars like 18 inches high forming on that road because of how much stuff was coming out of this tributary and washing down. So we essentially ripped the road to a depth of 2 feet with an excavator, decompact it, scarified a little bit, and then we brought in probably 100 cubic, probably more than that, probably 750 cubic yards of that fill, clean floodplain fill that we pulled out of the floodplain by the barnyard, brought that up there, worked it into that now ripped road surface so it has a little bit more soil, not just rock and gravel. And then we brought in about 300 cubic yards of that maple sugar bush thinning slash and worked that in as we were fluffing all of the backfill. And what we left is like this very chaotic, almost impassable, roughened road surface. So, micro topography, pits and mounds, ridges and furrows, whatever you want to call it. But it's essentially taking an excavator scoop and dropping the fill and doing this almost in a staggered position all the way down the road surface. We're not recontouring like you would a highway embankment so that it's plumb flat. We're making it so water can't go anywhere. It falls from the sky, it lands in a puddle, and it seeps into the ground, and it does not connect to like a concentrated flow path. And so you can see these little tiny wetland pits that we're forming on this road prism, and they're not overflowing, they're not intercepting, they're not connecting, they're not unzippering. And you can see we worked a ton of wood into this road bed or obliterated road. So having the wood on site was, a godsend, really. Northwoods and MWA built, and Fish and Wildlife crews built over 35 beaver dams along these tributaries, along these ditches that had been worked. So we do that first. We put the dams in first where we can, so that any other work upstream or adjacent work, it has these little check dams in case it storms during your project and you get some runoff or silt. You've already put some kind of assurances in the brook to trap sediment. But you can see a couple of these structures in the ditch. You can see how much water is impounding. Otherwise, this would be like a 1 foot wide channel, and now it's a 6 foot wide little pool. And we did some strategic wood additions towards the bottom where the tie-ins or where the confluences were with these tributaries of the main stem, just because we were able to get some bigger wood down there. Making this all fit into a QUISP grant, which is what paid for the restoration, has been a little bit of a exercise in patience and just tolerating very specific square boxes while holding a bunch of round pegs. So we were able to essentially come up with our as-built plan based on the work that had been done, that was illustrated in the final plans and the permits. And so, like, everything in orange, we treated as stream floodplain restoration. So beaver dams on this road, on this small tributary to fan out a ditch, floodplain restoration. Same thing over here, beaver dams on this road, cross-drain culvert that takes a lot of water off the hillside. Beaver dams, okay, floodplain restoration. Recreating floodplain habitat by the barnyard. Okay, that's clear, floodplain restoration. Tributary enhancement, floodplain restoration, right? But ditches, like, what the hell is a ditch decommissioning? Is that floodplain? Well, not really, but we were able to impound so much water and raise the water table so much and see these species come in. Like, we know this is going to revert to wetlands. The soils are perfect for it. The hydrology is there. The plants are already coming in. So we classified that as wetland enhancement. Our basin water quality or basin planner was like, this fits more into stream and floodplain because you really are improving you're improving hydrology. You're increasing the wetted width of these areas. So we're treating that, the yellow stuff, as wetland enhancement, but classifying it as stream floodplain enhancement. The road obliteration work is still not sorted out. Even using the P calculator for forest or private roads, going from does not comply with the AMPs or BMPs to fully meets the BMPs, that road obliteration project, if we treated it as a road BMP project, is a 13 kilogram phosphorus reduction. That's a huge number. But we went above and beyond BMPs. We completely hydrologically disconnected this road from the stream. You see any water coming off the hill, it's either going into the ground or it's settling into those little pits or those little off-channel wetlands that we made. So I would argue that we're going above and beyond what a BMP on a forest road would do for phosphorus reduction. But DEC hasn't got their understanding of this project type to the point where they can credit it. So we're kind of on the bleeding edge of that. So be wary if you're doing road oblit work or road decommissioning work that we haven't really figured out how to credit it. You see this picture again, and this is what it looks like now. No more barn. This is our reclaimed barnyard. You can see you've got a little swale to catch any runoff. Fortunately, the soils up here actually infiltrate pretty quickly. But this is our almost, acre floodplain that we reconnected. Another one down here. This is our obliterated road that you can see coming through. The vast trail actually comes out of the forest, crosses the town road, and then comes up and over our decommissioned barnyard, and then down this hill, across the brook at a culvert right here, and now shoots up that hayfield. So this used to be 9 or 7 culverts to get snowmobiles across this property. Now there's only 1. So a lot less management issues, a lot less conflicts with fish and wildlife habitat goals. You can see some of our woody structures out there in the shade. But everybody's like, okay, you made all this mess, and how did it hold up to the winter, right? Well, held up really well. This is our floodplain after the December floods, which was actually somewhat worse in places than the July floods because the ground was partially frozen. All that water just came right down. You can see a lot of wood still on the floodplain. You can see a little bit of sediment sorting, but we've still got vegetation. It was wet. It didn't scour. It didn't wash out. I'm sure there was some sediment loading temporarily while things are sorting out and getting stable, but held up miraculously well. Here's our alluvial fan. So you're looking up that road. This is our reconstructed stream bank and riffle. You can see these off-channel wetlands all the time. This is all overland flow coming from a beaver dam that we put in on that new reconnected channel alignment. So this is all coming across the alluvial fan. This is not a channel. This is just dispersed flow. This is that pocket wetland or off-channel wetland that we now have along the stream bank. It's got this nice gentle outlet over here where it kind of snakes around that soil lift and goes, passively or gently back into the brook. But you can see just how much retention we have right here and potential for, just minimizing sediment inputs and slowing the water down. This is what it looks like with some snow on it in March, still very wet all the time. You can just see how much water is coming off this place just perpetually. It's just, I can't believe people were able to farm it at all. You can see a bunch of our wood sticking out of the ground over here. Beaver dams impounded all through the winter. Lots and lots and lots of little ponds along these drainages. This was actually just a ditch that has now actually become part of a stream because of a reconnection effort we did. So this is what it looked like just a few days ago. Floodplain is starting to green up. Barnyard looks really good. Road has not washed out. You can see our tributary right there. What used to be a 1 foot wide, 3 foot wide ditch is now like 10 feet wide and 6 inches deep. So it's really spreading out quite well. You can see our riffle down here. A couple more beaver dams here. This is actually a ditch that we filled. You can see all this truck traffic up here. We filled this ditch. It was shaped like a T at the bottom of this sloping hayfield. And we filled the T and then put in a bunch of beaver dams down this. So it's draining this whole hayfield and getting treatment and reconnecting to our alluvial fan. So it's all kind of tying in together. And then there's this other sweet little trib that we worked on that I've got a better photo of right here. So this is that T ditch. You can see all the truck traffic. Fortunately, this isn't gullying or rilling, and I hope the grass comes in quick because it looks kind of ugly in this photo. But this is holding together really nice. No erosion. We got a bunch of straw wattles that we'll pull out this summer when things start to green up. We threw a ton of wood into these ditches as we were stabilizing them. But this is a really neat project area. So this is another tributary coming out of the woods. This is on the uppermost section of the property. This is not the one with the obliterated road. So it used to come out of the woods and come down this tiny little slot canyon of a brook. And then when it got down here, the farmer just ditched it straight to the stream. And it was weird. It had such a high sediment load that it was actually a perched channel. So everything around that ditch was low and wet and wetland. But so much sediment was coming down that ditch that it had created like natural levees. It wasn't burned material. You could see it was recent. And so it was kind of grading the stream above everything else. And so it was really easy to throw a couple beaver dams in there and get it to spread out. But I didn't like this ditch to begin with because it looked like it was in size. There wasn't much floodplain. You can see some structures where we were able to widen the channel, get some pooling and ponding. But for the most part, this is a brook that you can step over. But during that July flood, we saw that this tributary, right as it came out of the woods, it wanted to go in this direction. We think it used to go in that direction at some point, and it jumped to this skinnier, more incised area. And so we kind of coaxed it along. We put a few, like one strategic wood addition, some big wood right at that point where it was kind of depositing a bunch of sediment and wanting to encourage itself out of that channel that it was locked in place. And so we just kind of encourage it along, and we're able to get a split channel now. We're seeing a ton of water come down this otherwise dry, or not dry, is very wetland, seepy swale of sorts. And so now we're getting a ton of water coming down this swale. We put some wood in there to try to dissipate energy, slow things down, and it's spreading out. Now, we're seeing a wetted width of 15 feet instead of 2. And all this slowly makes its way back down to our tributary that we treated with, or our ditched tributary, whatever you want to call it, that we treated with a bunch of beaver dams. So that thing, I think, will continue to progress and spread sediment and water through both channels, which we think is a major win for how little work and effort we put in to this area that we didn't really have to disturb at all. Close up of the floodplain, looking good. You can see water ponding in little areas, lots of groundwater coming out of that barnyard. And then there's our alluvial fan. You can really see how much water jumps. This is our reconnected tributary. You can see how much water jumps out onto that fan while also having a channel, a proper channel. So if fish wanted to go up, they don't have to swim through a fan of 2-inch deep water. They can actually follow this channel and jump over or work through some of these beaver dams and get their way back up. You can see how much water is ponding at the bottom of this obliterated road. This is a little turnout swale. This is a little turnout swale just to make sure we don't have any rills that get away from us. And here's another little drainage that we put some beaver dams in. So all in all, we took down a farm. We built a riffle. We restored 1.25 acres of floodplain, over 3.5 acres of wetlands, 9 culverts. We took off 12 truckloads of tires from the silage and manure covers. We took 20 truckloads of trash to the dump. Built 35 beaver dams. Used 350 cubic yards of repurposed woody debris. Obliterated 1/4 mile of farm road. Connected 500 feet of stream. Filled, that's a typo, that should be 1,200 feet of ditches, and installed like 4,000 willow stakes along the banks and along that reconstructed channel. The restoration only cost $142,000. This was a wildly cheap project for what we are calculating as 28 kilograms of phosphorus. It's amazing that the farmyard reclamation, the restoration costs about the same. So things are cheap in the Northeast Kingdom, especially when all the material is on site. You don't have to haul anything in. So that is our riffle at the end of last summer or fall. We have a bunch of people who helped in this. The Nature Conservancy threw $15,000 towards Fish and Wildlife, who then paid for Northwood's crew labor. So there's a lot of partners involved, and a lot of people helped on this project. We're really proud to see it holding steady, and there's some shots of the hydro seeding in case anybody want to know what that looks like. So I hope I didn't speak for too long, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Yeah, I think it's great, Patrick. And yeah, happy to answer questions or happy to open it up for questions. So anybody, Stacy, see your hands up.
Yeah, hey Patrick, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Great presentation and really interesting project. Just a couple quick questions in thinking about this. Do you have a life expectancy for the beaver dam analogs in the sense of, like, I know, Shane, we've gone back to the clay plain forest and, like, adaptive management added on to them, pay attention to them. Do you feel like that's a strategy that will be needed in these types of projects for at least, maybe some period of time in order to get the vegetation? And part of why I'm asking is just as we continue to work with clean water service providers and other folks doing this work, I'm trying to think about how we make sure we build that into project funding. The other quick note is the FFI does contemplate a credit for road or ag ditch removal. So I will see if I can dig out what the equation is for that. But
Great.
there is a small credit for disconnection of a road or ag ditch pieces. And what's the last thing? I think there was one more, but I'll just stop there, and then if it comes back to me, I'll circle back
Okay.
around. Thanks.
So with the BDA lifespan, we are probably going to maintain the BDAs or at least do some really light touch maintenance for 3 seasons. That's what we've been doing on our Willoughby Falls Beaver Dam project. So one of the first beaver dams I built was in like 2014, and we kept building on that thing for like 7 years. You know, we didn't stop. We kept widening it because the channel kept getting wider. The backwater potential kept getting wider. So we kept adding to them. And I think that people certainly could do that. And it, you know, where it makes sense, it warrants a little bit of extra labor in year 2, year 3. I don't really think that we should be going in for 10 years and, you know, plugging these structures up. The whole idea is that one, in a perfect situation, a beaver would just adopt it and start building off of it. But we don't have much willow or beaver food up there right now. But as long as you start to get that, as long as you give them that kickstart, whether you're looking for meandering or pooling or sediment sorting, it all depends on kind of what you're after. But I don't think that they're not going to last 15 years. But I think it's a guarantee that if you build them correctly and pay attention to them after the first couple of years, they're going to function the way you want them for maybe up to 5 years. I think you could get 10 years if you were really committed to maintaining the structure. But, it all depends on like nature. Did you use hardwood posts or did you use, river birch that just like disintegrates after a year and a half in the water, So it kind of depends on the materials. It kind of depends on the building process. But I think in terms of like the benefits that you get, if you're really trying to grade, it might last longer because buried wood won't rot as readily as exposed wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry wood. So it's kind of a gamble, but I think part of the great part of this project is that we can monitor this work so easily because it's Fish and Wildlife land. And so we can really kind of try to answer that question for you over time. But oh yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I totally agree with all of those pieces. And I'm trying really hard to make sure that as we talk about funding and funding policies, that we are able to build in the adaptive management needs and the recognition, like these project types will require, say, 3 to 5 years of maybe more active interaction until vegetation and other things kind of are able to get established. That should peter out over time as other process takes place.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to also encourage partners to make sure they think about what is the stream process you anticipate taking over, to help make sure, like, what do we need for you to go back to help figure out what that stream process is to help kickstart it. So I appreciate your thoughts towards that. That's great. Thank you.
In terms of the FFI, I would love to see any sort of, calculations that you guys use. Like I've done some back of the envelope calculations for like land conversion using like the TMDL land type export rates. And it's like, this doesn't pair up with the interim calculator at all. So I don't really know where to go with that.
So, right now, several of the small streams that you did work on wouldn't even be in the FFI.
Yeah.
Or have an allocation. We are currently working on a process to provide a method to capture non-mapped streams or non-mapped streams that were mapped but don't have a corridor, or streams that were mapped but that don't have an allocation in the FFI. So hopefully that will translate. We'll be able to help translate that to elsewhere. The calculations and stuff for like the road are contemplating the hydrologic disconnection. So I think that totally makes sense in what you have. So
Great.
that isn't in the interim calculator. The other thing that we touched base on, I had a meeting with Claire Madden and the Otter Creek Basin Water Quality Council this week. And one of the things that came up is like riparian buffers. So there's kind of 3 ways that you can calculate a riparian buffer credit. You can calculate it because you get the overland flow reduction. And you can calculate it because you get the land conversion change. And you can calculate it if you have like a 50-foot wide buffer with the FFI because you get a stream bank stability. So that land conversion piece you talked about, Patrick, is in the buffer, the interim calculator's buffer calculation where it has that land conversion. That's, yeah, we don't contemplate that in the FFI.
But theoretically, you could like parse out that conversion number and.
Yeah, and that's my understanding in the interim calculators. You could say how many acres did you go from like active ag to forest. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
No problem. Chris, you got something?
Yeah, the great presentation. This is a great project. I was struck by how many of this same exact project I have seen across the state of Vermont. This is
like,
just, I mean, this
like you could carbon copy all this stuff.
You could carbon copy what you guys did up there. You could take to 100+ farms in Vermont. The thing that I wanted, I guess this is more maybe philosophical. I understand everything Stacy's saying, where DEC is coming from. We got to have, I mean, everything that you just presented was with the idea of this the phosphorus budget, and we gotta account for, right? What we can't account for is the wonderful wildlife habitat and that co-benefits that we're going to get out of this. I understand that the money's driving this. But we can't be paralyzed, and this is more of a philosophical thing for the group, to be paralyzed by this phosphorus budget that's what's going to drive everything we do. And I understand we got to calculate how much, yes, but we also aren't calculating the co-benefits of this particular project. And so I just think that we need to recognize, while we're trying to maintain this accounting for the money around phosphorus and a TMDL and all that. And so you all know that this isn't something I'm just saying here. I talked with the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources about this same thing on Thursday, when was it? Tuesday night, when I had a chance to see her. So again, I just want us to be thinking about all of the great work, the great co-benefit work that's coming from this. And this shouldn't be something that we're just thinking about in this equation that is around phosphorus reduction. So I encourage everyone to, and I know, Stacy, I know you're chomping at it, I get it, but we have to recognize that. And sometimes I think that we aren't seeing that. And I know that DEC recognizes it. I think we need to, on a project like this, and many of the projects we're doing, need to recognize that. So Patrick, great presentation, wonderful project. I wish we could take this on the road and have this same level of opportunity and what I want to say, I guess, ability, on a lot of other farms.
Yeah, it was pretty fun to be able to essentially have a license to kill and not be like, oh no, we need that area. Like, no, you don't. We're gonna turn it back. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, you know that I don't want to be a phosphorus bean counter. And also please know that at the Clean Water Summit that happened a couple of weeks ago, there was also a lot of voice from all constituents to say, please, let's not be phosphorus myopic to the extent that we hamstring ourselves and not be able to do projects that have amazing other benefits. So has been more discussion to try to push for larger co-benefit discussions and recognition. And, so it's nice that there's other voices also saying it. So thank you. Thanks for being a champion, because let's not get phosphorus myopic on these things.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I wasn't the only voice then, Stacy.
No.
Claire,
Okay,
you have a
Claire, I
question?
think-
Oh,
Yeah, I think my comment really was going to build off of a lot of what Chris just said, so I won't repeat all of that. But as through NRCC, we are an enhancement grant funder, block grant funder, and so when I hear about a project like this with all of the amazing co-benefits and all of the different types of aspects of the landscape that you're working on, not just sediment reduction, but habitat and flood resiliency and all of that. To me, that sounds like a really exciting funding opportunity under an enhancement grant. Now, that said, it looks like this does have a really big phosphorus reduction, so it obviously would be a huge benefit under the QUISP model. But I'm wondering if you ever, through working through some of the funding questions with this project, if you considered the enhancement grants, or if any portion of this project would have been sort of separable to be funded under a different way. We're just trying to figure out sort of how these two different funding streams would work most efficiently together, so that we don't, slow down project work while we're trying to work out the details of how to credit some of these practices, or, things
Sure.
like that.
Yeah, so I intend to hit you all up for enhancement money for our phase 2 projects, which is expanding up and downstream of the Valley Brook Farm. So we plan on replacing 4 culverts. We already have Stone Environmental working to engineer replacement structures. So 2 of them are private driveways. One's down here at the bottom of this figure, and one's this little red circle most of the way up. So those are 2 private driveways that we plan to replace pipes with, like a steel stringer and timber deck bridge, about 20 foot wide. And then these 2 triangles, one at the top and then one right kind of in the middle. Those are town-owned structures. We plan on replacing those. And the yellow is where we already have tentative landowner interest in floodplain restoration, whether it's just buffer plantings or like reserving this area for a giant alluvial fan where it just drops a ton of material every time it floods. So all these 4 structures blew out this summer in July. These 2 on the road completely overtopped, caused $30,000 worth of damage to the road, and dropped, dump trucks of sediment everywhere. So that's our phase 2 work. And I don't think QUISP will pay for everything, because structures are expensive. So we intend to request, enhancement money to pay for at least one or two of these structures. And then the P money, the phosphorus money, will cover, all the floodplain work and maybe offset some structure replacement costs, because we can do the floodplain work really cheap, to like the point of like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an acre or per pound. Whereas the structures give you like a tenth of a pound of phosphorus and cost $300,000. So that's kind of what phase 2 looks like, and we do hope to use Great Lakes fishery money, clean water service provider money, enhancement grant money, maybe chase Chris around for some Fish and Wildlife Service money, chase the Eastern Brook Trout Venture folks. Yeah, so we're gonna have to cobble a lot of money together for the next one, because it's a lot less clear cut.
Thanks.
This is Hillary. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties, so I'm on my phone now and I'm not sure how to raise my hand. But Patrick, could you speak just a sentence or two to the ongoing operations and maintenance and contracts required by the QUISP, and how that
Sure.
kind of worked out? And maybe Fish and Wildlife owns this property now. I guess I'm a little
Yep.
unclear about ownership.
Yep, so Fish and Wildlife owns it. Shane's group co-holds the easement. I don't even know if they have really any stewardship obligations other than make sure Fish and Wildlife abides by the rules. But so we actually built into our budget like year 0 adaptive management funds. So like that means, the first 8 months since we finished it, we have funding to go in, and if we see a beaver dam that's getting flanked, throw a chunk of sod down and plug the hole. If we see a little rill that's starting on the road, we can trench it into a vegetated area so it doesn't spread. So we have about, $8,000 left of this $142,000 budget to do that this spring. Throw pieces of wood that got left in the grass, into a channel, that sort of stuff. It's not going to cover like major replantings. The funny thing is we didn't plant any trees here. We drove some willows in the ground, but other than that, we didn't really plant anything. And so the idea is that Northwoods will have a contract with the QUISP to be essentially on call for management or maintenance. I would go and do, like, I don't even know if it's going to be me, honestly. It might be some other verification inspection person. I hope not, because I'd rather do it myself and say, hey, we need this work done right here. Can I call Meg and get this taken care of without going through this absurd procurement policy and contracting RFP? So that's how we hope to do it. It's always nice to have the person who built it come back and manage it, especially if it's not like a problem from the start, but it's just like a little bit of work that needs to be done to button something up. So we'd like to use that approach. And a lot of this is like, it's kind of like that old turkey chicken roaster, set it and forget it, hopefully. We don't have anything infrastructural that needs maintenance or upkeep. It's not a rain garden that needs to be dug out and, cleaned up every now and again. Ideally, this stuff really, is going to take care of itself. The beaver dams, we might do some patching here and there, or make one more structure where we think we could use it, or maybe expand one structure to get a little bit more floodplain connection if we want. But we're not going to go spend $50,000, keeping these structures operating for 10 years, because the wood's in the stream. It'll move around eventually and rack up. Once we start getting trees growing, shrubs growing, it'll start to, replenish itself. And really, this is a fish and wildlife property, so it's supposed to be very lightly managed. So I hope that we can get to that point and not have to, make it too complicated.
Fritz, I see
Fritz.
you have your hand up, but before you jump in, I just want to make sure, I'm sure it's gonna, well, I just want to double check. I am gonna I want to let this conversation run, because I think there's more value here than jumping into looking at our mission and vision statement. And we can always do that at another meeting. Is everybody okay with that? No objections. Okay, Fritz, you got the floor.
Fritz, I didn't know you snuck in. I should have given you a little shout out at the beginning.
No, that's okay. Patrick, this is awesome. This is, so often we do like little projects, they're not little, but we put a 50-foot buffer in, and that's kind of all we do on a property. And so it's really great to see such a holistic, restoration project where you're kind of doing everything and kind of making it messy, but a different way of messy than it was, nature's messy versus the farm's messy. And it's just so exciting to see this, especially like you're alluding to, Ben Copans and I were out there 15 years ago doing water quality sampling, and just, it was bad. And
yeah,
I you'd go down to the mouth of that stream where it enters Seymour Lake, and it was just like mucky from all the sediment and phosphorus and other nutrients and manure and who knows what else. So seeing this farm, revert back to a more natural state is just so exciting for me. And I guess my question, and maybe it's more for Ben Copans, who's I don't think is here, but is there going to be follow-up water quality monitoring? We were out there sampling water quality 10, 15 years ago, and the increase from that culvert just upstream of the Farrow farm to the bottom edge of the farm pastures, was dramatic. So it would be really interesting to do some follow-up water quality monitoring there. I assume Judd or someone will be out there doing electrofishing as well for the foreseeable future. So I hope that will be done. Now you won't have, this is a little joke, a little humor, but now you won't have to worry about being chased by bulls.
Yeah.
Well, except for maybe bull moose, which is an improvement. So
We did see a big old bear that would come down every morning and walk the edge of the field while we were taking wood out. We did do a bunch of e-fishing, so we have some work mostly related to those culverts that we're going to replace. There'll be like 12, 14-inch brook trout at the outlet of that buried pipe that they can't get up to 2 feet and then through 150 feet of pipe to that little tributary. And where we go right above the tributary, they're like 2 inches long. You know, they're tiny. So we have a lot of like the passage fish numbers. We do have some main stem fish numbers that were done before the project. I imagine Pete will want to go back and do that as more of a routine site visit. In terms of water quality, I did talk to Ben about this. That's more of Sarah Damzel's realm around here. She does most of the sampling, and we talked about it. And we determined that we weren't going to do it mostly because we didn't have pre-restoration data. There's a big gap since you did it and then Sarah did it a few years later. There's a long gap, and the cows had been taken out. The manure pit was obliterated. We did a bunch of stream restoration. So it's like parsing out where exactly those reductions are coming from would be pretty challenging, and maybe like throwing darts at a board with a blindfold on. But it would, I would love to see like the actual load data. Like if we had the time and capacity to put in like a stilling well and create a gauging station and do some routine monitoring and see like how the fluxes change. I would have really liked to do that, but getting that stuff installed last spring while trying to draft 6 permits for this project was not going to happen. So unfortunately, we don't have it.
I still think there would be a lot of value, again, because it's a holistic project. It's, you got the cows out of there, you got the manure pit out of there, you took the roads and the ditches. So I'm gonna talk to Ben about it.
Yeah, turn some screws.
And just a little bit, a separate question: are there, and maybe this is more for Will or Pete or Fish and Wildlife folks, but is there any plans for what you might call the uplands? The areas away from the ditches and the roads and the main stem?
I don't really know if, I mean, there's an interim management plan, but I don't know if there's been Judd might be able to answer this, but I don't know if there's really any plans for doing much at all.
Yeah, I don't know. This has pretty much been Pete's thing, and I come in to fly the drone. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I can't remember either. We went up to the upper field, but I don't remember what the discussion was up there.
Yeah.
If it was going to be passive, just kind of let it go.
At the moment, there's no access for a tractor to get up there to keep haying it or brush hog it without crossing a little stream. So I don't think they're going to be doing much.
All right, not seeing any other hands raised. Patrick, I wanted to ask, getting back to Stacy's initial question, I think it was Stacy's question about, the expectancy around the BDAs. So you answered that those are, it's a short lifetime expectancy, which suggests that you expect that there's going to be other factors that come into play that take over the functions that the BDAs are serving, which to me, I'm envisioning. So I have to imagine you're expecting the willow, the shrubs to move in, the channels to grade sufficiently that water's spreading out on its own, and those channels are kind of disappearing after 2 or 3 years of flow being trapped by these BDAs. Like, what does that look like?
Well, it's really a good question. Like, if you treat these, particularly tributaries, if you treat those tributaries as they are, they should move. They're going to wiggle. It's an alluvial fin. It's going to fill its channel and it's going to jump and wiggle over there. So that's why I'm not too worried about having a beaver dam last 10 years, because I don't know if that discernible channel that we put a bunch of dams in is going to be the discernible channel for 10 years. It might move around somewhere. So I'm not entirely sure, but if it gets half buried with sediment and the channel moves around, like, I still consider that a win. And that wood isn't going anywhere, so it's still providing that structure. Like if you're like really locked in a stream and it's in a trench and you put a beaver dam in and it blows out or flanks, that beaver dam is really not doing much other than encouraging sinuosity. And if that's the goal, then great. But guess what? That means sediment mobility, so we weren't trying to induce sinuosity as more, so we were just trying to make like a grade, and there's enough sediment load in these little streams that we don't have a problem with the aggradation, I don't think. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
no, you did. I guess I didn't. I wasn't sure that there was enough sediment movement into these streams to really bury them. And because it does appear that there's some slope, right, which would maintain these streams. But I was just checking that I understood it correctly, and I think that's been a switch for me over the last few years. Is that like a lot of what I've thought about as river restoration in the past is really, maybe how we should be thinking about this is really thinking about the fact that a lot of these streams were not actually streams pre-European settlement. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to obliterate these things and turn them back, trying to restore sheet flow, overland flow, and the wetland condition, right? And I just wasn't sure that was the long-term goal given the slope of these streams. You clarified that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think where it transitions from that 5% to like that 1 or lower slope, I think is where we're looking more for, like, we just want this to be a bog, boggy, because also that's the concern with us. Like when you turn a stream into a new area, where does it tie in? And is it going to just head cut over the bank and race upstream? So that's why we really want it to wiggle around and spread and diffuse and, not concentrate. So
can't put enough obstructions out there, right? The more roughness, the better. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're at 1020. This works out. I think what will work out well is if we skip sort of this mission and vision statement. See that we were going to do from 10 to 1020. I do want to mention that maybe we'll just table this for a next meeting. So yeah, we'll just table this for another meeting. But what we do have time for is just taking a quick look at this spreadsheet that is linked in the agenda. Do you all have that in front of you? Can you click that link and get to that spreadsheet? And this is really simple. If I say that, I'm having a hard time to get to the spreadsheet. Okay. So once everybody's at the spreadsheet, everyone's there?
I can drop the link in the chat right now too, for those that can't.
Okay, thanks, Kelsey. All right, perfect. So this is really simple, right? It's just like, who's participating in these meetings? What's your current role in river floodplain restoration? And then one column over to the right, what's your envisioned role? Do you see a change or increase in what, how you might be involved in river floodplain restoration? You'll see that I plugged in as many folks as I could think of. And I started to plug in what I thought of as your current roles, just to get you all thinking, maybe help you out. If that's correct, then you don't have to do it. If it's not correct, though, certainly making corrections as appropriate. And then if you see that your organization's role is going to change in the future, you're going to start to increase, the amount that you play in rivers and floodplains, or, the way that you do that's going to change. If you could just jot that down in that further column. And this is just a start of, like, I think it's great to know who's in this community, right? Like who's doing this work. So let's just start to get a handle on that. So whether you do it now, whether you do it when we conclude this meeting, we do have 9 minutes, and this was the last thing on the agenda for the next 9 minutes. So if anybody wants to type away now, that's fine. If you want to wait till afterwards to think about it a little bit more, that's fine too. Just wanted to start to populate this. And if anybody has ideas for other information that would be helpful, feel free to add headers, to the columns to the right. We can increase the information. Yeah, I think that's it. If I didn't think to put like, create predetermined values like such as funder, project manager, regulator, maybe I could have done that for consistency's sake. But I didn't. So I don't know if anybody, I guess leave it at that.
Shane, can I just ask a quick clarifying question? Is this specific to strategic wood additions, which is the header for this spreadsheet, or is it more generally river floodplain restoration?
Yeah, thanks. Fritz, great question. And that was my oversight. This is more general. I don't know. I'm so used to talking about strategic wood addition. Reflexes took over and I just typed SWA. So no, I think this is broader to river floodplain restoration. Thanks for clarifying that. Hillary, you have a question?
Yeah, I like the idea of adding the role that the different entities play. And also the conservation districts are, I don't know what we'd call us, maybe like local quasi-governmental. We're not NGOs though. We're like
Sure.
semi
Whatever you think.
Okay,
whatever.
I'll think of something and maybe Claire and I can think of something and we'll put that in there.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Stacy, did you have your hand up for this, or was that just?
Yeah, just what do you see? You mentioned that potential of other columns, but I guess what would you see the role, or what would you see using the spreadsheet for, Shane, so that you kind of have a sense of like what other things might be useful to add depending on how you would see using the spreadsheet.
Yeah, good question. I didn't have in my mind, a comprehensive set of uses for this. I thought that, I guess I'm just thinking it's, start developing it and then we'll all figure out how it's useful going forward. I mean, I just, like in thinking about future agendas, it's helpful. Like, what are the interests of the different people that attend this meeting? What do they do? Maybe that guides what conversations we have. So that's as far as I got. But so if you have other uses in mind and want to add other column headings based on those uses, maybe track both, maybe include what somewhere here, maybe another tab like uses of this spreadsheet, uses of this data. Feel free to do that. This is we'll consider this a crowdsourced database. All right, let's see. I have okay, I can see everybody. Anybody? I don't see any raised hands. Okay.
It was really
All right,
helpful to hear
so-
about somebody else's project today, Shane. Thanks for helping.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Great.
absolutely. And I was just trying to think of what to do with the last 5 minutes. And Will, sorry, you had perfect.
Yeah, no, Chris kind of teed it up nicely there by talking about the other benefits or co-benefits of these projects. So Chris, I asked Shane if we could include there's a FFI is working on a habitat component right now. And I asked if we could talk about that for a minute. Briefly, like, I mean, Stacy understands this much better than me, but anyway, my understanding is that they're looking for information that can help identify projects that can go in the FFI application, and they really want to do those co-benefits, so water quality, flood resiliency, habitat projects. And so they're looking for, they're incorporating our bridge and culvert data and including like the stream mile. They're asking about what's a good way to present that or to prioritize those kind of projects. I mentioned Keith working on that, the wood addition layer, that kind of GIS exercise to identify locations where wood addition might be appropriate. But anyway, just wanted to reach out to this group. I mean, basically just open it up. Like there's, they're looking for GIS-based data that can be used, you know, this is primarily in the Champlain Basin. So sorry, Patrick. But anyway, to identify projects, and it could be like a PBR type thing. And so, I mean, this is and above and beyond what's already in the FFI. So this would be habitat specific.
And Will, is this like, would this be folded into the FFI functionality that Liz Doran's been working on with the natural communities, or is it right in that same sort of quote unquote module?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that work is more looking at the upland connectivity. So how these river corridors, riparian areas are connections between, it's kind of building on the Vermont conservation design for those familiar with that. But what she's doing is looking more at like natural community, basically like trees and shrubs, trying to get a sense of what is the appropriate natural community for an area.
Okay.
And
AC, you have anything that?
Yeah, and I mean, Chris, to your bigger issue, like this is not, I don't know how this information is going to be used to direct funding. That's a much bigger question. This is, at this point, it's really just identifying those projects that could have co-benefits. The idea being that just having that information will help with identifying them. If nobody has that information, they can't do it. I think it's
maybe it would be helpful to the enhancement funding programs to help prioritize projects.
Yeah, no, it could definitely do that. But I mean,
I would say don't wait on the FFI for that. I mean, we all can easily talk to and demonstrate all of the other co-benefits, at a project site. While that module will be potentially helpful, the conservation design, the biofinder, there's many other current tools that I think people could point to help highlight. And best professional judgment with all the technical staff here also can highlight those co-benefits. So I just don't want folks to feel like they have to wait for the FFI in order to highlight those co-benefits, right? So I just, it will be a nice component of a tool. But I think there is a lot of already technical folks and resources here that can help highlight known co-benefits that people can include in their applications and things. So I'm hesitant to have the FFI tool become another lens through which projects have to be evaluated, right? It is a good planning tool. It is a helpful consideration, but I'm hesitant to have it become a tool for which funding needs to have a lens through that. So, please continue to, if there's, layers that you think could be helpful in that type of evaluation, yes, please share with the FFI team. We want to build on that, but, I do want folks to continue to use resources we have and see that as an additional tool, but not as something we need a lens through. There's a lot of pressure on the FFI tool right now with just phosphorus crediting, and it becomes a hiccup for people when we have to use that lens, only that lens to which we have to evaluate projects. So I just want to be cognizant of that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stacy. Thanks, Will, for that update.
Sure.
That takes us 10:32, respectful of everybody's time. Being respectful of everybody's time, I guess we should probably Click off. Thank you all for coming. This was recorded. A couple of folks did ask me that said they couldn't be here if we were recording because I think there was awareness that Patrick's project was pretty interesting. So if you know anybody that wants to get a look at that presentation, let them know to contact me and I can, well, I guess I will share out the link. So you'll have a link for the recording. So with that, happy Friday.
Hey,
Chris?
Shane.
Yeah.
Shane, real quick, that might be a great take this meeting to the field at some point during the field season. And Patrick's project is a great view, especially now that we're going to have maybe a growing season started on it. So just a thought.
Yeah. That's Chris taking these on-screen meetings out into the field. That's a great thought. I like that.
I was thinking about, so the Fish and Wildlife Department is acquiring, I don't know, many thousands of acres, a couple thousand acres in the Otter Creek wetland restoration EPA funds. Anyway, there's potential use for that, for Patrick's approach there. Although I know they already got an RFP and are hiring somebody to do that design. But anyway, just the concepts I think would be valuable.
Sounds great.
Enjoy the Friday afternoon, everyone. Take care.
See you, folks.
Thanks, Shane. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a great day,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.